Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is episode 5 of AWS tutorials. In this video, we'll see what is DynamoDB and how to store data using AWS Lambda. In this video, we'll create a DynamoDB table. We'll connect Lambda with DynamoDB. We'll store and read data from DynamoDB and we'll do the testing. In this session, this is going to be our flow. We'll create a Lambda and a DynamoDB table. And in Lambda, we'll write a code to read and write data in DynamoDB table. Now go to AWS console and here you just make sure you are in the correct region. And here we'll search for DynamoDB. Okay, so first of all, what is DynamoDB? DynamoDB is a fully managed NoSQL database provided by AWS where we can store and retrieve data using a primary key without managing any server. Okay, so here we do not have to create any server. We can just directly create a table and we're going to store the data there. Okay, so for that, let's click on this create table button. Okay, so let's provide a table name. In the partition key, we have to provide the ID column. And rest of the things we can leave it as it is. Make sure inside the table settings you have selected this default settings. Okay, and let's create the table. Okay, so the table is being created. So the table has been created. We'll just open it. So for now, what we'll do, we'll just going to create a couple of records manually. So for that, we just click on the section button, and here if you see, there is this create item. Now, like as we have already added employee ID in the partition key, so we'll provide a value here, and here we'll add a new attribute. Let's say string, and here we'll give, as this is a NoSQL database, we do not have to define the schema. Name as John Miller. Let's add one more attribute as number. Employee salary. Yeah, let's give 75,000. And let's add one more attribute, experience. Let's give 4. Okay, so we have added all the 4 required attributes here. Now we'll create the item. Okay, and here if you scroll down, here if you see that item is visible here that we added. So now what we'll do, we'll just add one more item here. Create item, we'll give employee ds2. Another column, employee name as Sarah Johnson. Now we'll give employee salary. Okay, so now if you see here, we have these two documents, these two rows here. Okay, so now let's move to Lambda. We'll click on create function. Here we'll select author from scratch. Here we'll write dev by Shashank, DynamoDB, integration, Lambda. In the runtime, we'll select Python 3.14 and rest we'll leave it as it is. So the Lambda has been created. So now let's write a code to read and write the data in DynamoDB table. So first let's write a code to read the data from DynamoDB table. Okay. In the input, we'll get employee ID. And for now, let's do one thing, import Boto3. Let's create our DynamoDB client. Okay, so now search for Boto3 DynamoDB. Doc. So now if you see, we have to first create a client object that we have already created. So now what we have to do, we have to fetch an item. Okay, so for that we need a get item method. Here, if you see, let's check the required argument. So only two arguments are required, table name and key. So here in this function, response equals to DynamoDB client.get item. Let's define table name here only. We'll get it from here. Okay. Okay. So what we are doing right now, we'll pass our employee ID and we'll try to read the data for that employee ID. Okay. So here, if you see, this is the column where we want to search for this employee ID value, and S is for the string because this employee ID column is string only. Okay. And it will gonna return the response. Let's change this response format a little bit. And let's do item equals to response dot item, and here we'll pass item. Okay. Now we have already created this function. So now what we'll do, we'll call it from here. Okay. So first we need a employee ID that we'll get from event. Okay. And then we'll call this function and we'll return this response from here. Okay. So let's do one more thing before returning the response. Let's log that response. First we'll print event. Then we'll print response. Let's deploy the code. Okay, so now there is one thing, our Lambda role does not have access to DynamoDB table. So first let's provide that access. So for that we'll go to this permission and we'll open that IAM role. So if you see here, we have this basic execution role permission only to log the data in CloudWatch log. Now what we'll do, we'll go to this add permission, we'll create inline policies. So first select a service. Here we need to search for DynamoDB. So now in actions, we have to search for get item because we are using this method only. Okay, and in the resources for now, we'll just select all. Okay, and we'll click on this next button. And in the policy name, we'll write DynamoDB read policy. Okay, so the access has been provided to the Lambda now. We'll go back to that Lambda. Okay, so now let's test that Lambda. So in the input, what we need an employee ID. Okay, so let's create a test event first. And here if we scroll down, this is the default test event. We need to modify it. What we need a employee ID. Okay, so as we have already added two rows there with employee ID 1 and 2. So for now, let's search for 1. Okay, let's save this event and invoke it. Okay, so here if you see in the response, we got 200 response here, and in the body, if you see, we got that data. We got that employee experience as 4, employee salary 75K, employee name John Miller, and employee ID is this one. Okay, so we have got that response successfully. So this is how we can read the data from DynamoDB table. So now let's do one thing. Let's write a function to write the data in DynamoDB table. Okay, for that we need write to DynamoDB table, and Amazon Q has already suggested that code for us. So here if you see, to write the data in DynamoDB table, we need employee ID, employee name, employee salary, and employee experience as well. here we have to use for put item. So let's check Boto3 documentation again. Here if you see, to write the data in DynamoDB table, we have to use this put item method. Okay, now here we'll search for required tags, and here what we need table name and we need item. So these are only two things that we need. So the table name, we have already provided table name, and in the item what we have to do is we have to provide these 4 arguments. So employee ID we have to provide, so that is going to be a string, so that is fine. Employee name, that is also going to be a string, so that is also fine. Employee salary, that is going to be a number, so instead of s we'll write n here, and in the last we'll add experience, that is also going to be a number. Okay, and in the response we'll return employee added successfully. So now let's do one thing. For now we have written this code to read the data from DynamoDB table only. Okay, so let's make it for write operation only. Okay, so let's modify this code a little bit. So what we'll do, we'll first get an operation whether we have to read or write from event. Now if operation equals to read, okay, so if the operation is read, we'll get the employee ID from event and we'll call this function. Else if operation equals to write, then first we'll get employee ID, then employee name, employee salary, and employee experience, and then we'll call this function write to DynamoDB table. Okay, so now let's deploy this code. Now we have to provide the write permission to this Lambda. For that, we'll go into this IAM role and we'll click on this inline policy. In the server, so we'll select for DynamoDB. In the actions, we have to search for put item. In the resources, we'll select all. Let's click on this next button. Here we'll write DynamoDB write policy. Let's create it. Okay, so the policy has been attached. Now let's test the Lambda. For that, we need to create a test event. Okay, so let's create a test event as test write. And here, first what we need operation. Operation is write. Then we need employee ID. Employee ID as 3. Then we need employee name. We'll write that name. Then we'll need employee salary. And then employee experience. Let's provide 6. Okay, let's save it and invoke it. So now if you see here, we got a parameter validation failed error. It's saying like we are passing integer type, but it needs a string value, and then it will going to automatically convert that value from string to number, because that we have already defined here. So for that, what we'll do, we'll just convert them to string. Now let's deploy the code. Basically the thing is, here we need to pass string objects only. Okay, and if you want to insert it as number or decimal, then here we can define it. Okay, so let's test it now. We have invoked this test write event, and this time it got succeeded. If you see here in the body, we got this employee added successfully. Now let's try to read that item. Okay, so for that, let's create a new event again. Let's name it as test read. Here we'll give operation is read, employee ID 3, and rest will delete. We'll save this event and let's invoke it. So see, we are able to get the data for that employee ID S3. So this is working fine. Both the read and write operations are working fine. So now there is one more scenario. What if you want to read all the data from that DynamoDB table? Okay. So for that, let's write one more function, def scan DynamoDB table. Okay, and this time we don't need any input because we are going to read all the data from DynamoDB table. For that, we need to call this scan method, and we just need to provide the table name. Okay, and whatever the items we'll get, we'll return it. Let's add one more condition. Elif operation equals to read all, then call this scan DynamoDB table. Else invalid operation. Now let's deploy this code. So again, the thing is our Lambda rule does not have permission to call this scan method. Okay. So for that, let's go to that role again. Here we'll create inline policy. We'll search for DynamoDB. So here what we are doing, we are calling scan method. So we just need to search for scan. Let's select it. In the resources, let's select all for now. Click on the next button. Here, DynamoDB scan policy. So if you see here, we have provided these three permissions, read, scan, and write in different inline policies. It is just to make it easier for you. Otherwise, we can add it in a single inline policy itself. Okay. So now let's go to that Lambda again. Now in the Lambda, we'll create a new test event. Test scan. Here in the operations, we'll write read all. And here we don't need any other input other than this operation. Let's save this event and invoke it. Okay, so here if you see, we got the data for all the three employees. Let's copy this list and let's go to a JSON viewer. Okay, so this is for employee 2, this is for employee ID 1, and this is for employee ID 3. So this is how we can read all the data from DynamoDB table. And now let's see in DynamoDB table itself. Here if you see, we have 3 entries for employee ID 1, 2, and 3. So in this video, we have covered the basics of DynamoDB table. In the later sessions, we'll see a DynamoDB table in depth. Thank you guys. That's it for this video. In the next video, we'll see the integration of API Gateway Lambda in DynamoDB table. So guys, if you like the video, please subscribe the channel and press the bell icon so that you can get the notifications of latest videos. And if you have any questions, just drop it in the comment box.